I want to invite Ieva from Mano Seimas in Lithuanian, or my parliament in English, which represents weirdly the oldest democracy on today's event, Lithuania, that gained independence in 1992, to tell us more about your work and how do you contribute to democracy. Ieva, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Odetta, and hello, everyone. So I represent an organization called Transparency International Lithuania, which is a non-for-profit, non-governmental organization. And for a long time, for about 20 years, one of the most important strategic goals that we had has been to strengthen political integrity in Lithuania. And actually, one of the key tools in achieving this has also been our initiative called Mano Seimas, or in English, it means my parliament. And I have been leading this initiative for the past 5 years, and actually very happy to be here and share more about our successes as well as challenges that we had to endure along the way. But before diving into the details of this online democracy tool, I believe it is very much crucial to set the scene and explain a little bit how come we decided to build this tool and how come it is now very much used not only by politicians, but also by journalists and citizens in Lithuania. So Lithuania, you heard a little bit about it from Odetta, so I will add that it's a very small country with less than 3 million people. And I would say that Lithuania has always been at the forefront of efforts to combat corruption and promote transparency, particularly through various anti-corruption laws. More specifically, in the area of political integrity, I would say that we were amongst the first countries in the world to establish a law on lobbying activities over 20 years ago. And this law, why I want to talk about it, was particularly important because its aim was to provide the public, the citizens, with insights into who is lobbying who, about what, and in general, to better understand how decisions are being made in Lithuania, in the parliament, in the government. So on paper, it looked as a very significant advancement to sort of open up decision-making processes. However, as probably many of us have learned throughout the years, the true value of laws lies in their enforcement. And Lithuania was no exception in this case. The law on lobbying activities wasn't achieving the desired impact, and lobbying activities were underreported. It was very difficult to understand who's actually trying to influence policy making in the parliament and in other national institutions and authorities. And also in Lithuania, we have this representative survey called Lithuania's Map of Corruption. And it has also been running for several decades now. And looking at that map, which is sort of a representative survey, we also have been seeing that about half of people in Lithuania thought that decision-making processes are closed, and they cannot get involved or cannot understand very well what is happening in terms of one or another law. Thus, having this as a context, several years ago, we decided to take a closer look at it. And one of the ways was to actually look at the agendas, working calendars of our parliamentarians. Working calendars were not a part of the law on lobbying activities, thus we thought it could be a good source to understand so with who our main politicians are actually meeting and what kind of questions they are discussing. So at first, everything looked very much manual. Me together with some colleagues, we were just diving into the internet, and just picking manually, copy pasting into the Excel file any meetings that we found reported by parliamentarians. And we were just trying to make sense of it, whether it's business associations that are meeting the most with politicians, whether it's non-governmental organizations, trade unions, or any other interest groups. So at first, I have to admit that the results were pretty surprising. We discovered a concerning lack of transparency. Only 4 out of 10 members of the parliament, on average, had publicly available working calendars. And of those that did so, only a third reported meetings with interest groups and lobbyists. And this actually raised several very important questions that we aimed to answer further. So one of the questions was, how were our parliamentarians making decisions without consulting NGOs, associations, or other groups? And were those meetings actually not happening, or they were happening, but nobody wanted to declare them? So it kind of became clear that while we had a legal framework, transparency and accountability was lagging. And to address this, we proposed 2 key ideas to our politicians, saying that actually ethical and transparent lobbying can be a positive force in policy making. And second, that a good politician is one who is active, accountable, and transparent. So to prove sort of those points and to encourage politicians to be more transparent, to be more active, we continued calculating their meetings from the agendas every half a year. We sent them emails encouraging to be more accountable, but at the same time sort of became a huge burden for us to do it manually and very consistently, because we are a non-for-profit organization. We also have to fundraise money in order to do it, to be able to continue with those efforts. So of course, we started thinking about how to digitalize those processes. And this is like, to support those ideas, we developed Mano Seimas, my parliament platform. And this kind of helped us not only to collect data easier, to show some rankings of politicians, but also we started putting there another data very important for decision-making processes in Lithuania. So for example, we uploaded data on long-term permits, who has the access to the parliament. We analyzed data there on committees meetings as well. So it became kind of this source of information around decision-making processes. And I think the key of it was not only showing data and being able to rank politicians, who is the most transparent one, rank political groups, but also it became very crucial in our data-driven advocacy efforts. It allowed us to have a more measured conversation with politicians, with facts. So for example, from that data, we learned that, for example, the Code of Administrative Offenses was discussed 200 times, while the law on environmental protection was addressed only 30 times during the last parliamentary term. And this sort of disparity highlighted the need for more balanced attention to various issues. And we also were discovering many interesting insights because of the platform. For example, we saw that those politicians who were the most active in proposing amendments to laws were not meeting with any interest groups, or just 1 or 2 per term, which also raised very good questions. How come is this happening? So essentially, this platform helped us to reach out to politicians. We started going to the parliament, presenting the platform, presenting the data, and it helped us to engage with them and to advocate for several things. So one of those, to open parliament's data and open data, because while working with the data, we saw that the quality is very bad. So we were already talking how to improve this, and actually we had very progressive and forward-thinking politicians who opened Parliament's data in open data format. And back then it was one of the most open parliaments. Now I know that there are more parliaments opening up their data in such format, but back then it was really a very good case example. It also allowed us to talk a little bit more about the law and lobbying activities that previously was not working. And the data that we collected, we actually used also to explain that we are not capturing lobbying activities very well in Lithuania. And a couple of years ago, our insights also supported the amendments to the law on lobbying activities. And now we have a very unique law. Both lobbyists and those being lobbied, for example, politicians, are required to report their activities. And we have this sort of cross declaration where we can see whether both parties reported their interactions. So going towards the end of what I wanted to say, I think we learned a very important lesson that data and digital tools should be more than just numbers on a screen or interactive features online, that they must be designed to drive meaningful change. And building effective tools for democracy requires more than just a technology, but also very important to have advocacy planning, identifying key stakeholders, and understanding the engagement strategies. So I think that even, especially in today's age of artificial intelligence and digital innovations, there are several key critical questions that we should always be asking ourselves. Why do we need this technology? How can it help us to achieve the change that we seek? And is it actually truly the best tool for the job? And I think once we have this in mind, we can build really good tools. And just to end, and I'm sure they will have more time to talk about it, now other chapters from Transparency International in other countries, they are also developing similar platforms to enhance democracy and transparency. And if you are interested, maybe it's a platform is in your country, who knows, you can just Google Integrity Watch and find whether it's there. I really invite you to visit those, because they are also analyzing data not only on lobbying, but also asset declaration, interest declarations, public procurement, and it actually really helps to strengthen democracy in various countries. Thank you.
Thanks,
see that
tick, 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 you know, we will not have a lot of time for discussion. Yeah. But I see that Fozidin is not here yet, so maybe we will have that extra time. But thanks, Ieva, for, you know, so well explaining such a complex topic in such a great detail that I think that it's really clear to the listeners of like how the context, but also how the platform operates and influences decisions.
Yeah.
And then, Ieva, you mentioned trailblazer politicians that agree to open data from the parliamentary meetings and everything. Can you share a little bit about your journey towards the open data and actually your relationship with politicians and you're enforcing them to, you know, or like even, you know, facilitating new laws to be set?
I think at the beginning, it was, of course, a little bit more difficult, as we've heard from also colleagues, mostly because the area that we chose to work with was lobbying. And lobbying in Lithuania for a long time has been considered as something negative. So when we released a first few rankings of politicians saying that whether they met with lobbyists or not, we were getting calls to the office saying, but I'm not meeting with lobbyists. It's something bad. I don't want to be portrayed like this. So the first thing that we actually had to do, talk a lot about lobbying actually being a good thing if you declare those meetings with lobbyists and if you are transparent about it. And through this sort of conversation, communication with politicians and parliamentarians, we found those transparency champions, if I can say like that, who agreed with our mindset. So we focused on them instead of focusing on those that were saying you are doing not a good analysis, that it's not working, and so on. We focused on those that said, yeah, we agree with you. So we continued conversations. We went to political parties, political groups at the parliament. We were invited to present. And this is how we found basically one person who also had IT background, but was a politician. And he got the main idea, and he made it happen, basically. So I think a lot of it was also up to being very consistent and going and talking with everyone, not saying that we're not going to talk to one political party or another one, just going and talking with them and finding those champions that support your idea and kind of move forward with it. Because once they do it, others sort of start following. Because it's somebody from their community, it's somebody from the parliament, from politicians, and so on. And one more thing I think that is important to note, that we've been building my parliament monoseimas through maybe two terms of two parliamentary terms. So we were able to kind of compare those two terms, and we saw that actually new politicians that get elected for the first time in the parliament, they are actually more active and more open and more transparent. So this is also another thing that worked for us, working with those that are newly elected, because they are just more open to employ those sort of good governance, transparency practices.
So leading by example and really just counting on the ones who actually agree with it. And maybe, Ieva, we can continue with you, because I think like when we were preparing, we had an interesting discussion that, people like politicians, they know that you exist, they know that you are monitoring, and that is already like a governance tool in itself. How important is people's participation? We heard from Fawzedin that, it's people's first, people first. Ieva, you're saying that it's politicians first, like the trailblazer politicians. But how important is people within your platform, Ieva?
So of course, citizens are very much important, because once we have this sort of data open and public to everyone, anyone can ask questions, anyone. And actually, more and more, we realized that journalists were using it and asking politicians, why did you not declare a meeting? Did you forget, or was it something else? And this is how people sort of started to get involved. But actually, the main target group, were politicians and decision makers in this particular case, because we wanted them to kind of start having those more transparent habits, more accountability, and provide information to citizens. So I think this has worked quite well, this sort of approach, because if we fast forward to now and to like 1 year ago, actually the parliament itself started publishing our data on their social media, saying that we did this analysis, and they are sharing it. We started having discussions, like, for example, last year, we had first political integrity discussion in the parliament, chaired by the chairperson of the parliament, with various political groups, with lobbyists, with monitoring institutions. And we were actually sitting down after those years in front of one table and discussing what we can do so that our decision-making processes in Lithuania are more open. So we will see how it goes. We have elections this October in Lithuania as well, parliamentary elections. But in general, the tendency has been towards more transparency and more support for accountability.
open data and open working together. That sounds great. Ieva, what do you think is the next biggest milestone in Lithuanian democracy continuing to thrive and be transparent?
That's a very difficult question, to be honest. Let's see after elections, but I think that the wave that I see with my colleagues from Transparency International, that the wave is going towards more citizen engagement through, for example, participatory budgeting tools, where citizens can in the municipalities decide and suggest their ideas that they want to implement and vote for it. And there are also digital tools involved in it. So I know that some countries are already have already started this like 30 years ago, but I guess in Lithuania it's really picking up now because also schools are doing it. And I think we are thinking more about citizen assemblies. So basically how to make sure that also citizens' voices are heard, and how to use digital technologies to sort of facilitate this process and to make it easier for them to participate in decision-making processes. So this is at least the trend that we are seeing in Lithuania in terms of democratic engagement.
That is super motivating and pleasant to hear, because I think that all of your work really contributes. And of course, like underlying enabler is digital technology. We wouldn't be here today talking about open data and government transparency if it wasn't for digital technologies. That actually, like, even somehow today talking to you guys, I was thinking like, I'm sitting in my room in Lithuania and I am getting a window into Nigeria, South Africa, and a completely different place in Lithuania, which is absolutely amazing, which bridges citizens, politicians, opens up possibilities for us to come together, to become more transparent and more inclusive in decision-making process. And the state of the world where we are right now, there is no other way. There is no other way for people to be aside than we have so much access to information, and for politicians to not be inclusive for this. So I really thank you a lot for joining us today, for doing the amazing work that you're doing, for winning WSA competition. And I really hope that I will meet you around in WSA events or just in different forums. And I also really hope that all of you will get connected and can share experiences and learn from each other as well. Just like we invite everybody on YouTube, all the WSA community or any other listener to get in touch. If you found something relevant, if you want to learn more, if you want to stay engaged, please do so. We're all about inclusivity and opening up the knowledge so that everybody can benefit. So without keeping you away from your evenings, all of us are in a very similar time zone, weirdly. I really want to thank you, and I hope I will see you again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.